Liz Truss and her premiership was part of a much bigger problem. And I would suggest that problem is deflection from the reality that is facing us. And it continues today in the persons of Raab, Zahawi, and Braverman, these right-wing obsessives who are more interested in ideology than getting the job done, who are more interested in their own fantasies, their own dreams, than in reality. That's the problem. And so the solution is trying to pull government back to real issues and the things that absolutely face the voters on a daily basis. So Liz Truss, her piece yesterday in the Telegraph, is exactly what we would expect from a narcissistic fantasist. She talks about the powerful economic establishment that refused to promote, to prioritize growth. 49 days of hell, reduced to 4,000 words of drivel and blame. Everyone to blame except for her. Not given a realistic chance. And she identifies two enemies. The first is the very powerful economic establishment. And the second is the lack of political support. I assumed my mandate would be respected and accepted. How wrong I was. That lack of political support, of course, from the opposition, but also from within her own party. But did she ever have a mandate? 81,000 party members voted for her. Most of the sitting Conservative Party in the House of Commons did not vote for her. 81,000 people decide the fate of 67 million people. That, I don't think, is a mandate. Quite apart from the fact that no Prime Minister actually has a mandate to govern. The mandate is given to the largest party, the party who has who have the most seats in the chamber. We don't vote for the party leader, we vote for our own MP. And on the basis of her, quote, mandate, Liz Truss thought that it was possible to change the manifesto on which the individual MPs were elected to bring back fracking and fossil fuels and to promote Kwasi Kwarteng's prodigious package. So we shouldn't be surprised that Whitehall, IMF, Biden all questioned what she was doing. Somebody has said the IMF didn't. I think that's wrong. I think the IMF did question what she was doing. This was the highest unfunded tax cuts in 50 years. You can go back to Anthony Barber on the 21st of March 1972, what he called a dash for growth, greed. And he was taking advantage of the confusion after decimalisation in 1971, something I remember very well as a small boy. D-Day, decimalisation day. And he failed. And Liz Truss should learn from his failure. Instead of being blinded by a desire to replicate the philosophy of Mrs. Thatcher. And Mrs. Thatcher, why does Liz Truss not read the material? We know she doesn't read her briefing notes. Could she not actually be bothered to read Thatcher's memoir or the various biographies about Thatcher, which make it very clear what Thatcher was doing? Thatcher set out a plan in 1979. She gave a speech in 1979 where she said that tax cuts were a vital part to a healthy economy. But the tax cuts she delivered were delivered over the entire period of her 11-year premiership. And actually, that principle of cutting tax continued all the way into the next Labour government. I think she cut 17% of corporation tax over the period of her entire premiership. Not in one day. And the tax cuts, therefore, were introduced incrementally. And they were only one tool in the armoury that she devised. The others were, for example, to reduce the power of the unions, to pick the right fight, not the fight that Rishi Sunak has picked, to redefine the job market. All of this, of course, at the expense of many, many people in the north of the UK, and the huge increase in unemployment. So getting the UK out of being the sick man of Europe, that came at a huge price. Getting it back to being the sick man of Europe took 49 days. And Truss was immediately criticised yesterday by a fellow Conservative MP, by Grant Shapps, not a very impressive person, but nevertheless. He said she needed to deal with the fundamentals first, the big structural issues like inflation, debt, before she even thought about tax cuts. But actually, what he should have said is that you need to have reality before your ideology. Simon French, an economist, simply observed that Liz Truss shows in her article how little she understands about the role of UK economic institutions and the whole nonsense of trickle-down economics. This is a term devised by Will Rogers, a comic. Will Rogers' economic forecaster, and Will Rogers, the Follies comedian from the 1930s, was absolutely right. Trickle-down economics is crazy, and it was crazy then. It doesn't trickle down, and Liz Truss has presided over a disaster. But it wasn't just those 49 days. It was the time that it took to get her in, the time that it took to get her out. Not just 49 days, but more like 4 months of endless, dithering limbo. Added, of course, we should add that to the time that Boris tried to cling on when it was clear that his premiership was over. This is all about power and the desperation of silly people to cling to power when it's actually vanished, when it's beyond their reach. A purgatory of deflection from real politics and real governance. And Raab and Zahawi and Braverman have ensured together that the distractions continue. The distractions continue. And, to those I would add Nadine Dorris, but vacuity. Vacuity and nonsense, but vacuity and nonsense can be dangerous. So there we are. Raab, Zahawi, Braverman, Dorris, Patel, Gove, all at fault for perpetuating this purgatory, this limbo. And at the apex of it all, or the bottom pit of it all, is Liz Truss, nurturing the growth of Kwasi Kwarteng's prodigious package.